Hey, friends, welcome to episode one of the Long Story Short podcast. I'm Justin. Each week, I'd like to talk about a film that was transformative to my life um, and kind of give you some backstory about where I come from, how my personality was formed through film. Oftentimes on this channel, I talk across race, across gender in the movies and TV shows that I watch. And I think that sometimes people may either be taken aback or they're like, why is this person talking about, female centric films or indigenous films or things that don't seem to have anything to do with him? And so, um, I want to tell you a little bit about me and where I come from, my hometown, and how I was raised, and how that informs the way that I watch movies and interact with media. So, anyway, this week I want to talk about a film. It was one of the films that was truly formative to me growing up, and that was the 1998 HBO original film Gia, starring Angelina Jolie and Mercedes Ruehl and many, many others. I was never the same after watching that film. Have any of you guys ever watched Gia with Angelina Jolie? It was one of her first major roles, and I think she won Emmys and basically whatever she was eligible for a TV movie that year. And for the next couple of years after that, went on uh, to win major awards for Girl Interrupted, and um, really became a mainstay in the industry. But Gia is about one of the world's first supermodels, drug addicts, um, openly bisexual women. She was avant-garde. She was punk rock in the 80s and during her time. And it was transformative for me as someone who grew up in kind of a genderless household to see someone expressing themselves so openly and so freely. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan in the 1980s. And that was an interesting time, kind of a transitional time for Detroit. I had a black and white TV growing up, one of those big box, consoles from the 1960s where it took 5 people to move. We went to Jacobson's, to the department store, every Tuesday for lunch. It was really, Detroit in the 80s was like New York in the 40s or 50s. It was old school and leave it to Beaver. Anyone that is Midwest or lives in the Midwest, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I was raised by two women. Um, my mom, I was adopted by a single mom, and her best friend, who was my godmother, she also, raised me. And they had a very, very close, special relationship. But in Detroit in the 1980s, gender identity, sexual expression, alternative relationships, there was a no-go. It wasn't even something that you could talk about, openly. And so I grew up seeing or watching my parents put on different personalities, different realities for the different groups that they would encounter. I grew up realizing that my mom didn't even feel comfortable within her own nuclear family to be herself and express herself. But the positive to that is that we had a lot of love, we had a lot of laughter within the four walls of our own home. We were free to be ourselves. And me being free and of, gender and identity was really, I think, important to my mother because of the repression that she experienced for good or for bad. That was the idea that she had. I'm not going to put those societal pressures on my own child within my own home, because I see how unhealthy and how toxic it is around people that I love. I love these people, but I don't feel comfortable being my full self. These people love me, but they love the image that I'm putting out. And so that was really informative to the kind of movies or the kind of media that really stuck with me. I loved Star Wars. I loved Jurassic Park, but the things that haunted me, that really stuck with me, were like these character studies, feminist character studies, where these women were redefining their own stories and living the way that they wanted to in society. I did not have an example of that. I had examples of women that were apologizing, unfortunately, to their own families for being who they were. And to watch a film like Gia, where she is a multi-hyphenate, where she is able to out loud live, a gender fluid life and be a model and be a this and be a that, and her sexual identity not be the only thing that defines her, that was a sea change for me in my young mind. And we lived in a really insulated way. We spent a lot of time reading and inside, but TV and movies, that was a window for me out into the wider world. I could leave my house in Detroit and see nothing. I could watch TV and see people living in all kinds of different ways. And so I taught myself so much through the lens of TV and film, growing up. And so to watch this film with Gia, with Angelina Jolie, who, when I watched the trailer on HBO, it did something to me chemically. I knew how nuanced her character was by looking into Angelina Jolie's face. There was so much sameness in the community that I lived in, that Angelina Jolie just had these exotic looks to me. And I was so desperate for something different and for something nuanced. And when she came along, I was just obsessed. Fell in love as an 11 or 12-year-old, and have had a relationship with Angelina Jolie ever since, going on 30 years. And so when I see stories about women, like I reviewed Sex and the City and Just Like That last year. When I see stories about women telling their own stories and redefining their own realities, it resonates with my own reality and with my own life in odd ways, because that's the story I grew up unfolding around me. These Mary Tyler Moore type women that were wearing their own pants and working for themselves and doing everything for themselves. That was the story that I was seeing, and so I resonate with those kinds of that kind of media. People that are openly able to express themselves. I, unfortunately, within my family, dealt with some sexual abuse growing up, and it colored or flavored my relationship to sex. How comfortable I was, and even am today, talking about sexuality and different things like that. And so to see stories of people that were rewriting their narratives and embracing that part of them, but not letting it completely define who they were, was just completely fascinating. In the film Gia, a guy falls in love with her, and he knows that She's basically asexual at this point in her life and career. But she falls in love with with his mind and the fact that he cares about her. It was not a physical love, but it was a mental, it was a chemical love. Um, and he let her wear the pants in the relationship and figured out his own relationship to gender identity. But he knew that he wanted to see through this relationship with this larger than life, once in a generation type character. Angelina Jolie in Gia is like Katharine Hepburn in the 1930s. Um, and if you watch the film, and I hope you will, you'll see what I mean. I think the tagline of the film is too beautiful, too fast to die, too beautiful to live, or something like that. And when you see the sum of all of the parts of this complicated young person, she's both young and old at the same time. She's wise and foolish at the same time. She has relationships with men and women. She's frumpy, she's small town, and she's also a supermodel at the same time. And people are just falling in love with her enigmatic personality left and right. She has no desire to be sexually desired. Um, but everything that makes her who she is just draws men, women, dogs, cats to her. And it's why she gets these huge contracts and why she's, an incredible supermodel. And one of the names that created the word supermodel, and Naomi Campbell and Cindy Crawford and these people followed just a couple of years after Gia. She is also one of the first celebrities to succumb to HIV, to AIDS, to die of AIDS. And to watch her go from being so alive, so in charge of her life and her narrative, and to have something that was happening in the 80s come in and steal that fire, it is a heartbreaking and a fascinating character study. If you have not watched Gia with Angelina Jolie, do yourself a film history favor, because you will understand Angelina Jolie as a force in Hollywood a bit more. I think if you learn of her, just from Jennifer Aniston and the Brad Pitt stuff, it's easy to just get caught up in tabloid stuff. But for a while with George Wallace, Gia, Girl Interrupted, with a lot of these roles, she was redefining what it meant to be a female actress in the late 90s. And I'm still fascinated by her. So, have you ever watched Gia? It's an HBO original film. You can Google where to stream it. If you just type into Google Gia, you'll be presented with options about where you can watch the film. It's gritty. It is for mature audiences, but it is one of the best performances I have ever seen, and I never forgot it in 30 years. And I think coming from, a home and a community where women were so stifled, made me so exhilarated to see stories of such empowerment. I was also drawn to stories about witchcraft and the craft and practical magic, when I realized that these were really stories about female silence, about not being able to express oneself and to tell one's own story in society. And the few times that women did speak out for themselves, they were burned at the stake as witches. And the idea of one's rage and one's repression boiling up and being so strong that it would manifest itself in a lightning bolt or a storm, it just is such an interesting and a fascinating concept to me. To think about the hundreds of years of repressed women who have not been able to speak for themselves. It resonates with the house that I came from. When I watch movies about the indigenous experience in this country, about how there are still groups fighting to be themselves and to tell their own stories after hundreds of years of war against their own ways of life. When I see people trying to grapple with questions of whether to leave home or not, I left my own reservation in the city of Detroit and leaving certain attitudes. It resonates with me. And to know that we are elastic people, and even through hundreds of years of all-out war, and even with women, thousands and thousands of years of putting women in boxes and telling them their place in society, they still have a desire, they still have a fire within them to tell their own stories and to express themselves. And it's when you really think about it, with the amount of repression and the amount of pressure that women have faced over centuries, to be nothing, to be quiet, to be this, to still see these examples in society of women like Katharine Hepburn, like Angelina Jolie, that defy norms. It's thrilling to me. And so I want to be a proponent of that kind of storytelling. When I do see people making stories like Killers of the Flower Moon, when I do see people taking responsibility and telling stories about the things that they've done in the past, I am a proponent of that, of the truth, I am a supporter of groups of people that feel marginalized, that feel like they can't live authentically in a whitewashed society. It is my experience through and through. It is our experience. And through film, I have been able to see the intersection of all of our realities and our stories and our commonalities. And it has made me a wiser person, a smarter person, to be able to talk about sensitive topics like abuse, about gender, about, all kinds of things, dating and men and this. And the reason I can is because a lot of these topics are very, very near and dear to, my heart. So this was episode 1 of the Long Story Short podcast. I hope that I illuminated you a little bit about who I am as a person. I hope that you learned a little bit about the film Gia, which is an absolute masterclass in gender identity and expression. Run out and watch it, and when you do, please come back and share your thoughts and opinion. And this is episode 1. I hope to drop one of these conversations each week where we talk about something important through the lens of film, and bring it home to something that is really, really important to us. I really love film and TV and how it relates to our daily life. So if you enjoyed this, please give this video a like, a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel for more of the Long Story Short podcast and for movie and TV related content. And until next week, have a great day.